Welcome to Lancefield on the Line. My name is David Lancefield, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Alex Mahon. Alex is the Chief Executive of Channel 4, the former CEO of the Foundry, Shine Group, and held various management roles in Talkback, Fremantle and RTL Group, and was also the Senior Non-Executive Director at Ocado. So TV, tech, creative industries, it's in your DNA, it's in your blood. And like my dad, you actually have obviously a background and a PhD in physics, and knowing what I know about physicists and what they think of social scientists like me, I'm particularly delighted you spent some time with me today. So thank you, Alex. Welcome to the show.
My dad was a social scientist, so you can get away with that. That's okay. I'm accepting all kinds of science.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about Channel 4, of course, strategy, culture, the spaces you operate in, the industries, but also about you in terms of your own leadership style, both past, present and future. So we're going to get straight into it. I want to start with opportunity, a bit of optimism. You will have seen some of your collaborators, competitors struggle, suffer. You've gone out of your way to help them where you can, but also that creates spaces for you to, if you like, step into as an organisation strategically. So where do you see the biggest opportunities looking forward for Channel 4?
Well, the biggest opportunity business-wise is in streaming, right? You know, the truth is that consumers are watching more and more video every day. And actually we had an uplift, probably about 30 minutes a day last year, from 255 minutes to 285. So let's assume that drops away a bit once we can do something else. But the truth is people are watching more and more video a day, and that seems to continue to increase. Now they're watching in different places. They're watching about 150 minutes of live television a day, and the rest is in all other forms. Netflix, all for our own service, Facebook, YouTube, etc. But they're watching streaming video and they're watching long form video, and that is set to grow. So the business opportunity for us is streaming, and that involves a lot of challenge, as we'll probably talk about. And then there's the opportunity of what our brand can achieve. You know, we've re-articulated our values, and we're about challenging with purpose. We're about reinventing entertainment and doing the new. We're about standing up for unheard voices. Yes. And it's those things, that sense of representation, that sense of purpose, that actually consumers want more and more, especially after a year of Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
And also after a year where, let's face it, we lost a lot of trust in authority, and we were searching for people to trust. And public service broadcasters have come out of that very well, because we provided facts and we provided news and analysis, and we also provided some distraction and some entertainment, which we all needed.
It's interesting the values you talk about there and what you stand for. Clearly it's not just within Channel 4. They, as you say, your viewers, listeners and so on will actually be the ones that care about that too, and that's a credible opportunity. But you started off with streaming. That's the way things are going. You also, obviously, in your new Future 4 strategy that you launched back in November, talked about the big shift in terms of becoming even more of a digital organisation. Where do you need to build more, if you like, capability to achieve those shifts that you've articulated, both in viewing, revenue, and the brand beyond that?
So if you think of our business, we've got a live business or an analog business that's declining slowly, not perfectly slowly. Nothing's falling off a cliff. And we've got a digital business, which is where the growth is and the future is. And the question for us is always about how fast to pile into one and how much it might damage the other. You know, it's a classic innovator's dilemma case.
Yep.
What Kodak didn't do, it's what the US railways didn't do when airplanes came. So that's the issue that we're dealing with. But we know what consumers want to do. We know that the consumer insight is they want to have everything whenever they want it, wherever they want it, ideally for free. So it's clear what our focus has to be as a business. And that means for us, actually, a lot of the change is behavioural. A lot of the change is how do we change our organisation, which is almost 40 years old, and make it about the new ways of distributing, the new ways of marketing our content, the new ways of reaching consumers. It's not necessarily about making the content new. It's actually, that's what people want. People want our editorial content. It's about how we change our business to get it to them where they are. And that means we need more, when you talk about skills, we need more insight. We need an insight that's actionable rather than just knowledge. which is a kind of intellectual shift.
Yeah.
We need digital skills from people who've done it elsewhere. So we've brought in people from lots of different digital businesses, from Lad Bible to YouTube to little studios who do this. We need better data throughout the business so that people can act quicker.
Yeah.
And then we need to let go of some of our old ways of behaving, which means challenging how we make decisions. It means creating a mindset where we can experiment, even though we know some experiments will fail. That's not a traditional broadcaster mindset. So it's those kind of changes throughout our culture that we're going through now.
Yes.
Good news is all our people like change. You know, they generally came to Channel 4 because they like innovating, and they generally love the brand because it does new things. It doesn't always make it hard to do corporate or cultural change, but the outputs of what we bring to consumers, they're always very excited by.
I can see that. So how do you sustain that change? Because say, you know, you bring new people in, you encourage them to experiment, you back them, you give them accountability, all the things you talked about. Many organizations start doing that, and then after a period of time, they sort of stutter, stop, get bored, get distracted. How do you, as the leader of the organization, sustain that change and that cultural evolution?
Well, I think change is hard for people in an organization, right? These days, everyone says they want change, but actually when you get to change, when you get to what that means, it's hard for people because change breeds insecurity, because you don't know what's going to happen. Like personally, I like that. Like that's what I find stimulating, but it's organizationally tough until you get to a point where the change starts to speed up a bit and people start to see success. And it's not all about, you said they're bringing new people in. Some of it's new people. Some of it's just giving opportunities to do things differently to the people you have, right?
Yes.
So a lot of people, you know, you tend to have people who are desperate for change. You have people who reject the change, and you have about 80% of people who just wait and see. But once you start to get momentum, people come with you. So the fact that we had last year over 30% streaming growth, and this year so far, we're up over 100%, people get enthusiastic about that kind of change.
Absolutely.
And a lot of this change is consumer facing, right? So we all know that we want to stream stuff. We all know that we want to watch on different devices.
It's very real, right? It's not something it's sort of in the clouds and theoretical. It's something
not super esoteric. It's not the behavior of people who are just the most innovative early adopters, right? It's mainstream behavior now. Yeah. So that helps as well. And as long as we keep making great work, and if we keep the brand fresh and the brand strong, then people tend to get with us, and the team wants us to succeed. But making organizational change is hard on people because it's continued difference in how they do business.
And you have to pace it. You have to pace it as well, and recognize that, and many people, especially at the moment, are needing to recharge, candidly traumatized as well. So I'm talking to other chief executives and working with them in like, they have an ambition to drive the business forward, and that's their role, but they have to be thoughtful and careful too. Otherwise, frankly, they'll leave people burnt out.
Look, as a chief exec, your job, you always want things to happen faster as a chief exec. I've never met any chief executives, so I'd like it to go a bit slower. So your job is to balance, are you going fast enough? And are you listening when people tell you you're going too fast? You know, a big part of the job is that judgment of pace. But I think you're also right to point out that right now, people are utterly ground down and exhausted. And I think we had lockdown 1, where it was all novel and our businesses were in crisis and we were trying to save them, and it was sunny. And then we had lockdown 2 after the summer, where we felt like, okay, this is just a last little push. Christmas is coming, it's all going to be okay. And then lockdown 3 came, none of us really expected it, and we all fell so flat. And the reality is people are very tired. Zoom, Teams, whatever you use, it's very tiring. Not seeing real people is the opposite of nurturing. You know, you've got no kind of nurturing, talking to people, having different conversations. That's tough. So people are just relying on stamina. And people are in the same place and exhausted, and one has to recognize that. Like, you can't get things done as fast as you want. So the key for us as leaders is to work out what must be done, and then achieve that, and accept that some things are going to take longer. but it is a constant reprioritization. And I think there's a lot that we need to do to be listening to our teams and our staff and understanding how we can help them.
What's the in your leadership team there you just talked about, what's the biggest change that you've seen that you'd want to continue? Because that's the debate of many other chief execs, which is we've come a long way. Yes, we need to listen. Yes, we need to heal. But actually, there's some things I really want to make sure we sort of continue some of the learning we've taken from the pandemic. What would be the one or two things that you've?
I think a few things. One is communication. Right, you can never do too much communication, but we really excelled in communication to our stakeholders and to our staff, and of course to the public. But the most important in this discussion is to the staff. So we moved to all staffs every 2 weeks, leadership group every week. We'll thin that pace out a bit now, but those all staffs, and one benefit obviously is you're much more in camera. It's like people see your face and they can see it close up. They know if you're lying. It's not like being on some faraway podium. Right. But they can also see when you're stressed, and they can see when you care about things. So I think actually in a lot of these broadcasts, there's a greater sense of connection. People can ask questions. I took all the Q&A submitted every week by staff, and I always answer them. So that's a positive. So we got to keep that up. There was a geo-leveling effect of that wherever you were, you had the same experience. Yes. It's very different in the London office or in the front row or in the special few or however people felt about things. So that's really positive. We really put our staff first and looked after them. I hope they would say that too, but we really, really thought that through as a management team. And when we made the sort of decision hierarchy of how we were going to do things and take coronavirus decisions, number one was staff well-being, and we stuck to that the whole way through. So that was very important. We kept all our staff on 100% of pay, even people who were furloughed. We really put health and safety first. So that's key to me. And then I think as a management team, we made better decisions, faster decisions, connected faster, and we became much more comfortable with constructive conflict so that we could get the right decisions. And I think that is a very positive impact for us as a management team of how we do things.
Yeah, they must feel psychologically safe to do so. So on that point, how did you create that safety that they felt that they could, if you like, have more of an honest conversation, even if they meant conflict? I'm sure you did that before, but if you've upped the game, what did you do to encourage it?
Well, I think we were more proactive in talking about what our team values were and what our team charter was and how we wanted to behave as a management team. And when we were in conflict, I certainly went further to try and resolve it and talk to people outside of meeting than I might have done in the office, because actually the dissonance, the separateness of not being able to get to them made me have to be more active and change my ways of
things can fester, right? A lot more if you can't.
Yeah, things fester. First of all, you have to put much more effort in to observe people on camera and try and read people's emotions and try and understand what people's reactions are. And if you haven't understood, you need to call them outside the meeting. And then I think there is a concern that when we're all annoyed about something in this environment, you can't just have a kind of argument in the office, can you? You can't just have it out. You can't just leave wherever you are and leave it behind.
It's a big move to switch the Zoom off. Yeah,
it's a bit more effort because you've got to do that and check in with people more. I think there's an authenticity to checking in with people more as well. And by seeing into everyone's home, by hearing the noise in the house, by having everyone's kids in shot, by knowing that we've all got to take a break, we've got to eat something, do this, do that. There's also a connection there, and that's a positive connection.
Yes.
It can take years to get to that. And the other big thing we've done is think about how we come back to work. How will people want to work? How do we move to fully agile? What flexibility can we give people? Because for lots of people, there are elements of this dreadful situation that they want to preserve.
Yes.
There are ways we can live better. And for each of us, that's different. But that's a kind of key thing that we work out what that should be going forward. So for us, we're moving to 50-50 working, 50% of the time in the office, 50% wherever you like. That's a big switch for an organization like ours.
Yes, no, it is a big, I guess, coordination when you want to be in the office
Yeah.
is even more important. I do know some people who've, during different parts where you could go into offices, have gone in probably to get away from home or to have a break or whatever, and then gone in and obviously haven't coordinated effectively. It's like, I'm in an empty building. But you talked about decisions there, on critical decisions in terms of whether it's strategic, your culture of the organisation. I'm curious as to how do you personally, how do you make these decisions? Obviously, you do it sometimes on your own, sometimes with the team, depending on the type of decision. But what stimuli do you use? How much reflection do you have? I'm just curious about your own process for decision making, because that's critical to any CEO.
Okay, well, I'm a physicist, right? So, and I've worked in the creative industries for 25 years. So I'm a total mix of left brain and right brain.
Fine.
So I am like both laser logical and data driven, but also quite focused on thinking about how people are behaving and feeling. But I'm quite hypothesis driven too. So for me, it depends on the kind of decision. Look, if it's long-term strategy, what should we do? Often you can get a lot of data and a lot of scenarios around that. And I have a very strong exec team, so we can debate stuff.
Yes.
But a lot of the decisions that come to me on the short term, on the what should we do about this, they're not 25, 75, 80, 20 decisions. They're 49, 51 decisions.
Yes.
Right? That float up to me daily. They are decisions that is very difficult to make the call on. And every call could be right or wrong, and my job is to make sure that we've thought them through, and generally to try and call more right than wrong. But those last minute decisions or big decisions or editorial decisions, they're not the easy things that float upwards. So that's often like judgment about the team, asking questions to understand how we've gone about the process of decision making.
Yes. And I guess you're having to be super smart with your own time, energy, attention yourself, and obviously make sure you look after yourself and get the balance right between, if you like, outside, inside the organization, fixing issues, if you like, exploring areas. Where and how do you find the balance between those different dimensions of where and how you spend your time? The current business, for example, looking at that, making sure it's still profitable in order to feed you all, versus also making sure you're investing in the future. Those are all different elements, different ends of the axes, if you like, that you're working towards. How do you get a sense of where to focus?
Well, I try and focus, more than 50% of my thinking on the going forward, on the future strategy, ideally 60, 70%, because that's where it should be.
Yes.
A bit of it, of course, has to be retro, because they're kind of the retroactive information helps ensure that you have the right knowledge for how to think about the future. But for a lot of that future facing strategy stuff, you also need stimulation from elsewhere. You need ideas from elsewhere. You need conversations with external people, conversations with internal people. So that's a big focus for me personally. And then, a lot of my actual time is also spent on stakeholders, government, board, different institutions we deal with. And that's an important role of the chief exec as well, because it's that connection to the outside market that is a big part of my job. And a lot of operational day-to-day, I have a great team, so they help me hugely with that. But the things that come upwards are the really tricky, and a lot of the kind of future-facing strategy. And then there's culture of the organization. Who are our great people? How do we want to do things? Are we living day-to-day in line with our values? What are the big decisions to make, like the stuff about how we work, that affect that culture? And how do I make sure we get that right? I mean, it's that balance. And then I try to find time in the day to like slump on the sofa with a glass of wine and watch telly.
Ask about that. You need to breathe too and replenish yourself and have a bit of fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Luckily, my main way to do that is either getting outside for a bit of fresh air or lying on the sofa watching telly, which fortuitously is part of the skill set for my job. So it's very
that works well. That works well. But you talked about, if you like, development and seeing new places, meeting new people. Upskilling as a term is being used a lot more over the last year, whether you like it or not. And that applies to all of us, right? What have you learned? Or what are you proactively learning rather than just experiencing in your job, where you thought, you know what, there's a gap or there's an area I'm really, really keen on learning, and because it's particularly relevant to the organization now or the organization you're building?
Yeah, I try. One of the main ways I find you can do that is by talking to other leaders and understanding what they're doing in their organizations.
Yeah.
You know, whether that be totally different businesses like Salesforce, or, you know, I've got a friend who runs a travel business, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So I talk to her about what consumers are doing. I talk to other people about what they're seeing in their digital businesses. I read a lot. I talk to people in other countries. A lot of my friends are in television in international countries elsewhere. So I talk to them, I talk to people in streaming businesses. So there's a big responsibility on me if I'm going to come up with new thinking, is I can't get that from my own organization. You know, I've got to go elsewhere and talk to other people to do that. So I really missed that in lockdown because it's hard. And then I talk to people in adjacent businesses who are friends. So I find that can bring you a lot of stimulation because it's similar problems in different sectors. So that's one of them. And then, you know, a bit of reading, a bit of knowledge from other businesses. But I find all the creativity, all the ideas generation comes from other people. And that's something I really missed in the endless world of it only being legal to go for a walk with one person at a time.
Indeed, indeed. We've heard a lot about efficacy, particularly recently, particularly in relation to the vaccine. I'm interested in your own view of your own efficacy. If you had to think about the future and you had to look back on your impact on Channel 4 and all the different constituents and stakeholders, I mean, you're a catalyst for the sector and the creative sector. How would you like to be described?
Well, I wouldn't want to be inefficient. I wouldn't want to be non-efficacious. That sounds dreadful. She was non-efficacious. Look, what I'm excited about is Channel 4 is doing this digital streaming stuff first. Like, we're already the broadcaster with the highest percentage of digital revenues, and we're already the broadcaster with the youngest audience, and we're doing this switch to streaming first before any other broadcaster worldwide. Yes. So that excites me because, oh, we're the first in doing it. It doesn't make it easy to be the first, but I like that. I think people would say that I'm making the changes we need to make at a decent pace, but you'd have to ask them. But I think people would probably describe me as pretty inefficient in that stuff. But, you know, I'm flexible as well. I'm organized flexibly. So I try and turn my attention and my energy to wherever it needs it the most. So I'm also, like, when I'm actually sitting on the sofa doing nothing, pretty good at doing nothing at all. So
that's refreshing to hear.
Time of day and when it's needed.
That's refreshing to hear. I have to say, I've for various articles I've written and work I've done, interviewed many CEOs and obviously worked with quite a few. And particularly, I have to say, and I will make a gender point at risk, there's a lot of men who, if you said to them, so what do you do when you're just not working? And often it's sort of a blink to say, and then it's sort of, then you get the answer, as opposed to a hobby, nothing, reading, family, or whatever, just because it's sort of all in. And I don't think you can be all in all the time, right? You have to breathe, you have to relax.
And look, I've got 4 kids, so I'm together with them all weekend. You know, if I'm doing something on my own, like exercising or going for a walk with a friend, that's my time on my own. But also the truth is now, you can be available for work whenever, right? Because you've always got your phone. The issue is, how can you make yourself be off?
Yes.
Especially in the Zoom thing. The tendency is to, like, schedule meetings back to back, back to back. Well, the truth is, when we were in the office, it wasn't really back to back, was it? Like, sometimes if I was coming to meet you for a meeting, I'd have to get there. Sometimes
space in between. You'd have some time to do something else or have a chat with somebody.
Lunch. Not very often, but you would go out to lunch and then you'd have the time to get there and then you'd have to commute. And I'm having to be, like, quite controlled with myself now because the temptation is just to fill all those hours, and that can't be right to do.
Well, you're aware. I think many other people would say the same sort of thing. I just want to, you're good at pivoting, so I want to just pivot back for a moment because my brain's ticking over as you're saying things. You've been double downing in a number of areas. Digital is one, streaming you talked about, but original content, short form content is something you're doing, as well as obviously pushing out your regional model even further, and you were the first again to do that. We've had a big experiment, you might call it that, in Quibi, in original short form. What did you take from that, and what have you learned from that in terms of the lessons for Channel 4?
Well, I was glad not to be an investor. No.
Okay, fair enough.
But I think, look, a great, brave, bold experiment. And, you know, it's important to applaud that. because, you know, all too often we're too scared to do experiments, but they definitely did it, and they did it at scale. Yeah. But the truth is that what we see with consumers, when I talked about how many minutes of video people watch, it's mainly long form. You know, even a lot of YouTube stuff now is people believe it not to be long form, but it is, you know, it's 20, 30 longer minutes. It's not like 2 minutes. And the short form that is on Snap, etc., who we have a wonderful partnership with, is very specifically designed for that platform. But the growth is in long form, quality content. People are often watching it on a big screen. And I think Quibi just got that wrong. They did short form quality content designed for a small screen. And you do see people on the tube, oh, the glory days when we used to go on the tube. You do see loads of people watching television on the tube, but they're generally watching long form from a known platform that they've downloaded onto their phones. You know, when I see people in the morning doing that, because obviously I'm on the tube, like looking over everyone's shoulders, they're watching apps of stuff on Netflix or all four that they've already downloaded when they had great bandwidth at home. So they're not watching really, really short form. And then, of course, you can argue that Quibi was or wasn't launched at a dreadful time. But the truth was people didn't find the content compelling enough to change their behavior.
I guess one of the best things about your job is that you are inundated every day, every minute with fantastic ideas, formats, you know, content, talent. And it'll be unfair, but allow me to be a little bit cheeky, be unfair to call out any, but over the last year, or indeed looking forward, what are the ideas, the people where you thought, wow, this is absolutely amazing?
Oh, well, I thought last year, so many great shows last year, but Grace and Perry's Art Club, I thought was spectacular. I don't know if you've seen that, but it was a beautiful and accessible articulation of so much that is great about Britain, but so easy to watch as an art program. And it was about bringing people together and understanding how we all felt. So for me, it was a real knitting together of how we feel about the world. Rocks, which was an amazing film we made with kind of early stage filmmakers and all brand new amateur talent, which is a wonderful film about life in London. And then look, this year so far, It's a Sin by Russell T Davies, which is about the pandemic of the 80s and the horror and the unfairness and the shame that people were forced to live through and die through with HIV and AIDS. But also the juxtaposition of the joy and the excitement of coming out and coming to London. So I've been very proud of that, because it's also made rates of HIV testing shoot up in this country. So those are examples of our remit at its best. But they made me happy, especially Grayson, because it was a fast reaction to what the nation was suffering in lockdown.
We could talk for hours, but we're not, because I'm respectful for your agenda and your time and your energy.
Yeah, and you want people to watch this, so you can't make it too long.
Indeed, but practice what we preach, right? Hey, I love your ambition, genuine ambition. I love your strategic clarity, humanity, and also the fact that you, if I may say so, don't take yourself too seriously in terms of, you know what's important in life. Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure spending time with you. And that was another edition of Lancefield on the Line. Many thanks. Thanks, Alex.